If you've seen my other videos, then you know I'm a huge fan of Autofac, but honestly, I am trying to convert myself over to using IServiceCollection. Hi, my name's Nick Cosentino, and I'm a Principal Software Engineering Manager at Microsoft. I love writing C# applications, using dependency injection, building plugin systems, and historically, I've used Autofac because it has been so much further ahead than IServiceCollection. However, over time, that gap has absolutely been closing, and at this point in time, I'm starting to find that when I'm building ASP.NET Core apps, when I'm using Autofac, I'm fighting against some things that should be a lot easier with IServiceCollection. In this video, I'm going to walk through a very basic registration technique that's common in Autofac, I use it heavily, and how we can translate that over to using IServiceCollection, because in the examples I've seen, it's not as common that we see this with IServiceCollection. A quick reminder that if you like this kind of content, subscribe to the channel and check out that pinned comment for my courses on DomeTrain. With that said, let's jump over to Visual Studio, let's check out IServiceCollection and Autofac and compare this registration technique. Alright, so on my screen I have some Autofac code for setting up a dependency container. I do want to mention that if we go into look at the project here, that I do have Autofac added, and I do have the Microsoft extensions for dependency injection added as well. If you're building ASP.NET Core apps, I believe that you are getting this included automatically. This is just a console application, so I did have to go add that manually myself. And then of course with Autofac that is not included, so that's also been added. Alright, so this example code is very simple. We're going to start off with the Autofac pattern here for creating a container builder. This is going to be the thing that allows us to create our registrations. And then I have a registration here that is a little bit more complicated than we might see in the traditional sense. Traditionally, if we were to try and register something that was essentially just going to be my type here, so some type that we want to register, the way that that might look is we would say builder, and we would ask it to go register the type exactly as it is. You can see that Copilot is guiding me along here, but you'd have a registration that looks something like this, right? You could say register the type, give it the type itself. You can say as self, or you can exclude it. In this case, it will be the exact same thing, but as self just explicitly says that when you were registering this type, if you want to resolve it, you need to explicitly ask exactly for the type as it is. And then single instance makes it such that when the next person goes to request this, it will just give you back that same instance. The code that we have below is very similar in nature, but one difference is if we go look at the type itself, jump over to that definition, we can see that it has a primary constructor. So it takes in one value just called some value, then there's a property for it as well. The tricky part here is that when we're just going to use the typical syntax, like we see on line 12 here, when we go to resolve this type at runtime, which would occur down here on line 24, we're asking the dependency container, hey, go get me my type, right? We ask for it. When it goes to try and resolve it, it needs to look at the requirements on the constructor for my type. Again, if we look here, we can see that we have a primitive passed in. So string is just a primitive type. That would mean that we have to have a string registered on the dependency container, and it's kind of weird because when you go to do something like this, it's not a really good pattern to just have a random primitive that's been registered on the dependency container, because if you have more constructors taking in more primitives, you can imagine that you're going to have a lot of complication that comes about with that. Instead, and this is a really simple example, right? What I'm doing here is I am explicitly setting up my object. You can do this in different ways as well. Sometimes your configuration might not be just as simple as passing in a string. You truly might want to do some configuration and pass that in. And your opinion might be that if you explicitly have the registration broken out like this, it makes your code easier to understand. There's no right or wrong here, so if you wanted to have more verbose construction here, this is your opportunity to do it with this syntax, which is just register. It gives you the component registration context, so if I hover over this, you can see iComponent context. It does allow us to go resolve other things, so we could ask the context to go resolve. If we had other dependencies, we could go ask for those things here. Before we move on, this is just a reminder that I do have courses available on DomeTrain if you want to level up in your C# programming. If you head over to DomeTrain, you can see that I have a course bundle that has my Getting Started and Deep Dive courses on C#. Between the two of these, that's 11 hours of programming in the C# language, taking you from absolutely no programming experience to being able to build basic applications. You'll learn everything about variables, loops, a bit of async programming, and object-oriented programming as well. Make sure to check it out. There is something that I'm not going to spend time on, but if you're curious about it, there is another opportunity here that I won't go into a lot of detail on, but you can have these factory delegates. So that way, if you had, say my type has 3 more services that are dependencies that need to be passed in, but only some value as the string is this configurable one that we need to do, and we can't get that off the container, we could go make a delegate function to go work with that. I can probably make a video on that in the future if you want to see it, but for now, this is just a registration callback that we have to go do some more verbose setup. Hopefully you can see what that pattern looks like and understand how it works. And like I said, the single instance is just tacked onto the end like we see in the traditional way. From there, that's our registration that we have on the container. In Autofac, we need to say go build that container. So we get that. And then you don't have to do this line if you don't want to, but this is to get a lifetime scope if you're managing different lifetimes. And then we can resolve the type. So either off the lifetime scope itself or directly from the container. But at that point, when you call this line on line 24, Autofac will go create that instance for us, doing what we just walked through. We'll go run this code. And then from there, we're going to print out some value to the console. If I go put this in place and we run the Autofac example, we should be able to see something very basic, but we see hello from Autofac, and that's because we do pass that in here. Okay, so very simple Autofac example. Traditionally, when I'm writing code, I will have a combination of things that look much like this. Registering things with their implemented interfaces is a lot more common for me as well, but I also have this kind of code sprinkled around. Now we're going to go look at the service collection stuff that's built in for dependency injection in C#. So what that looks like, if we scroll down here, is very similar, right? And the thing that I wanted to call out because I don't see it used a lot is that with service collection, when we create a new one, this is the call that we need to make to basically go get the same type of registration callback like we see here. Because again, the typical way that we might do that is we have services, and we would go say something like add singleton. But this is going to have the exact same problem that the original Autofac one had, right? So if I scroll up, this code is not going to be able to execute properly because we don't have a primitive string type assigned to the container. And in my opinion, it's probably not great practice just to go register a random string primitive on your container. This is going to have the exact same problem as the line I just deleted above in the Autofac example. But this add call that we have right here essentially gives us the same abilities that we saw in the Autofac example. So we say the type that it's going to be returning. So when we make a new service descriptor, we say this is the type. If people are asking for this, this is what they should be getting. When we go run this code, this is exactly the same as what we see up here from lines 15 to 17. It will match 35 through 37. I'm just changing the string so that when we run these examples, we can see this one is coming from the IServiceCollection. From there, the only last thing that we have to mention is the singleton part, but not very special, right? It's just kind of like what we saw when I had it here. I guess that's not the right thing, Copilot. This would have been my type, right? So singleton, and up here, we can see that I'm doing single instance. Same concept, nothing fancy, just showing you the syntax. From there, we have the service collection completed. So we've added our one service that we're interested in. We go ask to build the provider. And once we have the provider, much like the container from Autofac, we can go ask for that required service. From there, we just print out the value to the console. If we were to look at both of these, the big difference is just that we're using different frameworks. But the pattern that I wanted to show you is that we have this opportunity to have a registration callback that's kind of generic feeling. We can write whatever we want in the callback, and we have that in both of these frameworks. If I go run these both together, we can see that we hopefully get 2 different outputs. We see one from Autofac and one from the IServiceCollection. So there's the Autofac one, and if I scroll a little bit lower, we can see IServiceCollection. Same concepts, different frameworks. Now, I did mention that I've spent a lot of time working with Autofac. Years and years working with Autofac. And at this point, it's basically one of the first things I do when I'm creating a new C# application. I just go add the Autofac nuget package, start making my dependency container, and moving on. But I am trying to get more familiar with IServiceCollection, but it's almost like muscle memory. I need to make sure that I'm saying, hey, look, don't add Autofac, start with your service collection. And this was one of the things that's kind of holding me back because I'm not used to doing this pattern with the service collection. But there is one more thing that Autofac, in my opinion, does super well, and I'm not quite ready to switch over until we go look at this next video to see what we can do. Check it out.